Welcome to the Pursuit of Learning podcast. I'm your host, Clint Murphy. My goal is for each of us to grow personally, professionally, and financially, one conversation at a time. To do that, we will have conversations with subject matter experts across a variety of modalities. My job as your host will be to dig out those golden nuggets of wisdom that will facilitate our growth. Join me on this pursuit. Today on the Pursuit of Learning, I have Traver Boehm. Traver is the author of Today I Rise and Man UNcivilized. He's a two-time TEDx speaker, men's coach, and the founder of the Uncivilized men's movement. This movement is radically redefining the way men around the globe experience their masculinity by uniquely blending both primal elements of manhood with massive doses of consciousness. Traver and I have a wide-ranging conversation about all things masculinity. We talk about the founding of the Man UNcivilized movement. We talk about Traver's journey through heartache, loss, and grief, and how he came out on the other side. We talk about what it means to be a man and the downsides for society when we repress it. We also talk about the nice guy syndrome and how to kill it. I had a blast talking to Traver and learned a lot. Enjoy the conversation. Traver, welcome to the Pursuit of Learning. I want to start our conversation by taking you back before the uncivilized man movement. I'd like to start with multiple things that happened to you in 2015 and how that started you on this journey. Can you talk to our listeners about what you went through?
Yes, I would be more than happy to. Even a step before that, I was just kind of plugging along at life, Clint. I followed the standard track. I went to college. I got a job. I went to grad school. I decided to open a business. I fell in love. I got married. I was checking every box you could possibly check. And then my now ex-wife, I'll give you a little bit of foreshadowing, and I got pregnant for the first time. And unfortunately, that pregnancy didn't see itself through and we miscarried. And that was the start of a cascade of events that drastically shifted my life. First, just to say, I didn't realize that a miscarriage would affect me. I was your standard American athlete business dude, right? I didn't feel pain. I didn't have pain. If I had issues, I drank them away. I got high. I was like your standard American human who was like, yeah, everything's great. And this was actually the better tagline. I'm fine. If at any point anybody asks me, how are things? I'm fine. Everything's fine. And this was the first time that I wasn't fine, but I didn't know it. All of a sudden, my, couple drinks a couple times a week went really through the roof. I'm going to come home and smoke a joint after work. That became, I'm going to wake up at 6 a.m. and get high. Oh, I'm looking at a lot of porn. I am exercising 2 or 3 times a day. I am coming up with new business ideas, literally anything to take me out of my body. And so in very rapid succession, miscarried. My now ex-wife took that, or what she told me is that was actually a sign from the universe that our marriage was supposed to end as well. And so I woke up on a Saturday morning and played with the dog and made her breakfast and asked her what she was doing for the day. And she said, I'm leaving in an hour. And she literally did just that, packed a bag, and I didn't see her again for some time. And that was poof. That's how fast things were going. At that point, I kind of realized I'm not quite okay. I can't get away with saying I'm fine. So I spent the night in my business partner's house that night because I just didn't want to be in my house. And the very next morning over breakfast again, he said, it seems like your life's kind of fallen apart. We should probably just go clean slate. I don't really think you should stay in this business either. Let me buy you out and move you out and let me take this over. And there's obviously more to the story than this, but those were the three big pieces that happened, like boom, boom, boom. Those were the dominoes that now all of a sudden I am not within a fucking country mile of being fine. And I recognize for the first time probably in 40 years, I'm not okay. And this started a process of inspiration, of learning, of therapy, of a deep dive, of falling, landing on rock bottom is unique. It's enlightening. It's as enlightening as it is awful, but there's so much potential there, right? So literally I went, okay, I'm not going to survive this. I will literally not. I know myself. I have booze in the house. I have guns in the house. Like I'm not going to live through this experience. So I have a couple choices here. I immediately quit drinking that day, quit smoking pot, quit all of it. It was like, you know what? I don't know if I'm going to do this forever, but for the foreseeable future, this shit isn't going to help me at all. And went to therapy. Started going to men's groups, dove into workshops, really started to answer the question, who the hell am I? Right, here I am. I'm about to turn 40. This was like a week before my 40th birthday. And I went, okay, this is the midpoint of my life. I don't know who I am. And here's the even more important question for later work. Who am I as a man? And these were things, Clint, that just weren't in my consciousness. Like, I didn't get pulled out of a college course and they were like, hey, this is where you figure out who you are. Or, you're 25 years old. You really should know who you are as a man before you apply to this job. It was like I was in the system. And so this started so much inquiry and so much work and so much looking at my own shit and looking at past trauma, looking at my family of origin, looking at how I express myself, how I stuff my expression, my relationship to pain, my relationship to intimacy, my fear of intimacy, challenges with my parents, challenges with my upbringing, trauma from being bullied, like you name it. I had to finally go, okay, this is so big that it's unavoidable. So let me dedicate some time to actually diving into it. And it was the hardest fucking thing I've ever done. And yet, in hindsight, the single best thing that I've ever done.
And part of what you did coming out of that was you wrote a book for other men and women who are going through what you yourself went through. So for those out there, Today I Rise, how to use the pain of a breakup to reclaim your life. Effectively, this is the roadmap you took to get to the other side. And one of the things you say, your message in it is, it will be okay when you get to the other side. Getting to the other side, though, that's the journey. Can we unpack a bit of what your journey looked like to get to the other side? Because very early on, you went with the 1 Year to Live project. And there's a lot of things you did in that 1 year to really, I think, lay the groundwork for who you would become.
100%. I was so fortunate at the time to have whatever you want to call it, of divine inspiration, of knowing, of a download, or whatever it was, that was this voice so early on in the process that said, hang on, because there is another side. You can't see that other side. You actually don't even believe there's another side. But trust that there is. And if you do the work and you do this right, the other side will actually be better than what you have now, or what you're grasping and clawing to get back. And so that was the faith piece. And so, yeah, I designed this year where suddenly, like, I'm not having a kid, I'm not married, and the deal I worked out with my business partner was I would have a paycheck for the next 2 years. That's how he would buy me out. So that's a lot of open space. And I get that most people don't get that open space. And so what I didn't want to do was waste it. Like, I had so much advice at the time, as I'm sure you can imagine. People were like, start another business, start dating, go get remarried. Like, this is dumb. You can solve all of your problems in 2 months. You just need a little bit of action. But I had this feeling that this was a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I was actually hoping it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. When else would I have had all of my social ties cut? Potentially. When else would I have complete freedom to roam, to literally do whatever I wanted, and still have the support financially, still have the support of friends and family? So It's a long story, but to make it short, I asked the question, or I saw a flyer outside of a Zen center that said the Year to Live program. I went, oh, that's really curious. What is this? And it was based off of Stephen Levine's book, A Year to Live. And it was for people who had terminal illness. And so it's a 12-month meditation practice or 12-month meditation process to prepare them for death. And I looked into it and I went, wow, that's really curious. I feel like I'm dying. I feel like I'm dying every moment of every day. Let's just be honest about it. This was not fun. But what if I did this instead of when I was 82 or 80, whenever I was going to actually pass? What if I did it here at the midpoint? What if I went back and I closed all the loops that I needed to close from my past? I apologized to people. I asked for forgiveness. I told people I love them. I went on some adventures. Like, what if really I thought I had a year to live? Like, truly, not the standard, like, oh, I'd go to Thailand and I'd bang a bunch of hookers and I'd get great surf, and everybody's kind of standard answer. It's like, yeah, but what would you really do? And so I designed this year that I hoped would do two things. One would allow me to heal as much as I could from my past and from this rapid succession of traumas, of like big traumas. And how could I prepare myself so that the next 40 years of my life would be radically different than the first 40? So I had to do all of these things that were different than I'd done in the past. So I volunteered in hospice and I worked with people who were dying. I apologized to an ex-girlfriend, like fully, like sat down across the table, had lunch, and was like, I was a fucking dick. I'm so sorry. If you can see it in your heart, please forgive me. And all of these things closed loops, right? Yes, I locked myself in a pitch black room for a month. I put myself through survival school because that's what I'd always wanted to do, kind of like Outward Bound Huck Finn as a kid. I went and did some leadership training. I did some men's work training. And I wandered. I did some just like, let's wander the earth. And it really did begin to inform what you said, like talking about the book, was how do I take these lessons? Because I get it. People who are getting divorced, most people have kids, or they can't just like wander for a year, or they may not even want to. But how do I instill the lessons? Like, you don't have to sit in a pitch black room for a month to learn what I learned. If I can articulate it and explain it in a way that you get the gem without having to go through the process. And so I did that whole year. And at the end of it, truly, if you want the dead honest truth, I was depressed because for a year I had a process. For a year I had structure. For a year I knew what I was doing. If you asked me on January 5th, where will you be October 11th? I could tell you because I had a calendar in front of me that gave me stuff to look forward to. But now it was back to reality. Now it was back to, okay, what the hell do we do now? This adventure's over. And I was very fortunate at the time to be living in someone's house where I didn't have to pay rent. So I didn't have this survival need to go out and just make a quick decision of what to do. And my good friend Drew, he realized that, like, you're not doing that. It was like 2 weeks of me lying around where he's like, you got to do something, right? It's good to have good friends. And I was like, okay, but I don't know what to do. He goes, what if you wrote a book? What if you actually wrote 60 individual letters to the you who woke up January 15th and found out that your wife was leaving an hour later? What did you need to hear that you didn't hear? And I went, I think I can do that. And for the next 6 weeks, I pumped out 90 individual letters. And I wanted it to be, literally, it was the book I needed to read that day. And so it was a mix of these stories and these lessons and the hero's journey of coming back to society transformed. And here you get to share the gems. And it felt so good to be of service, to say, oh, wow, my pain, this thing, that the most horrible thing that I could imagine never surviving. One, I think I've survived it. And two, now if I share it with other people, it's going to make their journey so much easier or so much clearer or so much different. Because what I was talking about in that book was, how do you use that pain? Not how do you ignore it, not how do you bypass it, not how do you survive it, but like I took a little bit of my old cage fighting mentality and was like, you know what? What if I throw some fucking elbows with this pain? What if I choke the shit out of it? What if I like get aggressive with it? How can I alchemize it and use it? And the reaction I got from the book was mind-bending, Because people would literally say, no one's ever told me this. No one's told me I can use my pain. No one's talked to me the way you're talking to me. And this is when the ball dropped. That started to be more men than women. And if you've ever been, if you're in the social media space or the self-development space or the spiritual space, or I was an acupuncturist,
Predominantly women.
predominantly women. And who reaches out? Predominantly women.
That's
Who
right.
comments on posts? Predominantly women. Who DMs you? Predominantly women. And so suddenly that's what I'm used to. But then the numbers switch. And it's like, wow, 5 men reached out, 1 woman. Something's different here.
I know you read a lot of books on men's work. I'm wondering if you may have read Under Saturn's Shadow.
I don't believe I have. No.
Well, one of the things he talks about in there, he talks about certain rules for men. And one of them is men suffer in silence.
Mm-hmm.
And so in general, we don't reach out. We
Right.
don't call another man to say, hey, how did you do what you did? There's a ton to unpack in what you just said right there. Yeah, you dropped a fair amount. Well, so we're going to come back to a fair amount of it.
Okay.
One of the earlier things you did was the hospice.
Yeah.
And one of the patients you worked with, Ernest, told you that you could never outrun the pain.
Yeah.
What did that mean to you at the time? And what did it bring up, and how did you address it?
It was so impactful, Clint. It was just so impactful because when I first met Ernest, I need to paint this picture that he was in a wheelchair. It's a guy in his late 80s or late 70s, but he had cirrhosis of the liver, he had cancer, he had emphysema, he was a lifetime drinker and a lifetime smoker. He was literally curled up in a ball. I thought he was going to die within days when I met him, right? Like one of the very first things I had to do, which taught me about hospice, was I watched him try to light a cigarette like 6 times. And I am as anti-smoking as a human can get. I'm old enough to have flown on airplanes when people could smoke. And I lived in Japan as a kid, so I had to fucking fly back and forth every summer and just sit there for like 18 hours while people smoked in my face. But I remember picking the cigarette off the ground, putting it in my own mouth, lighting it, and then handing it to him and going, this isn't about me. So imagine this man who's literally what feels like at the time, he actually came out of that when we started hanging out and lived for about another year. It looked like and felt like he was so broken. So to have him have this moment of clarity and say those words, they've just pierced my heart. And really, at the time, I was running. Right? I was running. I didn't stay in Santa Barbara. I didn't stay around my business. I didn't stay where I could run into my ex-wife. I didn't stay in California. I literally left the country to get away from all of that experience. And so what he was telling me was, you can still go, you can still move, you can still physically leave yourself, but the pain will follow you. It will follow you to the ends of the earth. It will follow you till the end of time. So at some point, or at multiple points, you're going to have to stop and sit down and let it take you over. And that was something no one had ever told me, ever. And maybe it's in books, the books that I wasn't reading, but to have it so poignantly there from a man. And then the follow-up sentence was, he pointed to himself and said, this is what happens when you do. And I went,
wow.
Oh, fuck. Right? Like I just got chills, man. Like
I smoke, I drank. I was doing that all because I was running away from the pain.
100%.
I wasn't willing to sit with it.
Right. And here I am, literally late 70s, with a brother who's healthy, with kids who are healthy, dying. And so it just knocked me. Like it rocked me to a core that it changed me. That I went, okay, I need to learn. I don't have the skill. No one's taught me this. I have to learn how to alchemize and sit with pain. I have to learn how to have pain in my life without a joint, a beer, porn, exercise, work, whatever it was that I was using to numb it. And so it was truly one of the most impactful conversations I've ever had in my life.
And 4 things that you started to work with during those dark times were journaling, meditation, movement, and sleep. So I'm curious on all of them, but especially sleep. Are those four things that are still very important to you today?
100%. Like
Okay.
literally 100%. I even, at the time, I think I'd started like a Twitter handle, which I don't have anymore, which was like move well, eat well, be well. And the be well was journal and sleep. And it was like, if you don't have these foundational basics as a human living in the society that we live in, you're not going to make it. This is a challenging culture that we live in, no matter what, in the West, right? You're going to be bombarded with media. You're going to have shitty food. You're going to be stress is like a selling point. It's not set up for holistic living. You'll be isolated. And this was pre-COVID. And so as a human, these are the tools that you need to have. And I was, a little bit more aggressive. Like these are the weapons you need to have in your arsenal. Something happens today that upsets you, you get triggered by something, you got to know how to write that out the next morning or talk about it into a journal, especially. Meditation, I was doing it before and I'd had experience with it, but not to the extent where I went, okay, this is saving my life. This is fucking important. Then it became enlightenment tool or whatever we want to call it, a practice that I still have today that informs my creativity and informs my writing and informs a lot of higher level experiences. But at the time, it was a life jacket. It was like, you don't want to drown? Do this every morning. Movement, I've been everything from a collegiate to a professional athlete and to this. I literally before this was on a jiu-jitsu mat for an hour before driving home. We're humans. We're meant to move. Like, look at the world. The challenged people don't move very often.
So movement to you doesn't have to be one thing. There's multiple paradigms for movement.
100%.
Okay.
Human animal is designed to have its body. We're designed to move our bodies. Right? We're designed to move our bodies. Look at most health issues in the West. Like the top 5 health issues in the West can be cured with a lot of movement and a lot of vegetables. Right?
Yeah. Eat less bad food, go for a long walk and do some yoga, and you'll cure a lot of what humanity has wrong with them. And in fairness, it probably would also help a lot with COVID.
100%.
Right? For the amount of people that are having problems with it tend to be people who are unhealthy, have pre-existing conditions. And if they were eating more nutritious food, exercising regularly, likely less issues with it. And maybe we wouldn't all be locked up as long as we are.
100%.
That's a whole other
other can of worms, right? And it's not a popular can of worms.
Yeah.
And then sleep, to me, there's just still nothing more important. And that is the root of health. And I still I was a challenged sleeper prior in my previous life and sometimes still am. Running an international business and having a social media following and having to deal with humans and having a startup business and a partner and life. But I know when I get a good night's sleep, everything else falls into place. When I don't, everything else is challenged. And so sleep at that period became really, really important because I viewed it again as a weapon in my arsenal and a survival tool.
What does good sleep look like to you?
To me, it's just the number of hours that your body needs. I don't want to be too vague. It varies from person to person. But to me, then it's the practice of, I'm not looking at any media past 10 p.m., right? That's my cutoff time. And I'm going to sleep in a pitch black room with dark curtain, with a blackout curtains. If I'm somewhere that's noisy, I'm going to have earplugs, right? I'm going to let my body get up when it wants to get up. And if possible, I'm going to set my life up so that my body gets to get up when it wants to get up, which unfortunately, my body's still, it's like, it's 5:30, bro, let's get up. Even though I don't have anything on my calendar until 10 a.m. But yet I haven't woken up to an alarm unless I'm catching a flight in years. And I know we can call it a privilege, or we can say, this is how I designed my life, right? I could be taking 6 a.m. calls. I don't. I used to teach at 6 a.m. I used to have jobs that guy had to be there at 6 a.m. So really it's looking at, when does your body want to sleep, right? Again, mine fluctuates between like 5 and 6 hours.
So it's not hours, it's quality for you.
It's quality.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quality. And I was going to say, I was just in Tulum for a weekend, and on the very first night, I went to bed at 10 p.m. I didn't wake up until 10 a.m. 12 straight hours, and just went, hey, this is what my body needs right now. Obviously, it needs it.
Hmm.
So most of us, we fight with sleep. We try to keep ourselves up as late as possible by looking at media, and then wake up at a time that the minimum amount before, so we can rush out the door when we used to have to rush out the door, or have no practice in the morning, no morning time, no ritual, no transition from unconscious sleep to conscious day. It's just like wake, brush your teeth in the shower, shove a fucking bagel in your mouth, drive to work, and then start your day. So it's just for people listening to this, like, just think about your sleep. Think about it. It is a weapon in your arsenal.
So I'm going to take you on a different angle now. You read the book, How to Be a Man, and 3 months later, you were in a yurt with Robert Masters. I'm actually in a training with him this week. So I had my morning session. You and I are recording, and then I go back on. So hopefully
I love it. Say hi for me. I love him. He's a great man.
Yeah, and that's maybe where we're going, because my question for you is, what is about it? Is it about his writing and teachings that resonates with you so much? And how has that informed how you work with your clients and what you do with the Uncivilized movement?
That book was my starter kit to men's work. It hit me so hard because Robert was so unapologetic and clear about having a relationship with both your heart and your guts, right? So he was the first person that I went, wow, you're significantly older than me, so I'm not impressed with your physicality, right? He's in his 70s or late 70s. He's had some health issues. Where I came from the athletic world, where it was like, you're bigger than and stronger than me, I respect you. With him, when I met him, I just went, your clarity is like nothing I've ever experienced. The clarity of your words, the penetrative nature of your words, the undeniable nature of your words, how you're talking about men in a way I've never heard before. I was raised by an attorney. I want to find a hole in this so that I can argue against it, and I can't find one because it's that pure. And I'm not saying that he doesn't have challenges and he hasn't had a challenge pass and whatever. But when I've been in a room with him, he matches his writing. That's why it was so impactful. It's like Robert the author and Robert the man are the same guy. And I've been in a room with so-and-so the author and so-and-so the person, and they ain't the same person.
That's right.
There's clearly a disconnect. So, I mean, that book, Clint, it was like, where has this been? You know, I had this question, who am I as a man? Where the hell has this been? And maybe it was around and I just didn't know it. But that thing, to this day, I still read it and like, I read all the parts that I have highlighted, which is essentially the entire damn book, right?
Yeah, I have it up on the shelf beside yours, actually. And the way I describe him is he's a surgeon with the work he does. I did an all men's group with him in December. Now I'm doing professional training with him, and it's a co-ed group. And he's the same way with men as he is with women. And you've been there. We all start our share. And then he starts asking the question, and whoever it is crying within minutes and right back to that childhood wounding. And it's just beautiful. But he's so compassionate and caring and surgical in the way he does it. There's so much to learn. Right. It's beautiful.
It's such a brilliant process of like slowly walking someone to the point they don't want to go, holding them there until they've gotten what they've needed, and then gently guiding them back out so they're okay. That to me is a level of mastery that speaks to the years and decades of work that he's done and the thousands upon thousands upon thousands of hours of people he's worked with.
Agreed. So as we start to get to the end of Today I Rise, I started to get a little sense that Man UNcivilized was coming, and I'll read 2 quotes that stick out to me and see if we can unpack those and whether that was the start of a bit of that journey. So one of the first things you said was, how you start your morning is how you live your day, and how you start your Monday is how you live your week. The other one was, actions trump all, and when done, actions don't require any words to validate them.
I don't believe Uncivilized, it might have been in the background, but at the time I still didn't think I was going to be working with men. That was me tapping back into really just an athletic point of view or a primal point of view of if you want something, go build it. If you're not getting the results you want, come back to the source, come back to the root, right? And with actions, if your actions come from your heart and your actions come from your gut and they are pure, they literally, you said it, they don't need words. And there's really no space for words. Again, it's hard to actually physically describe. But I remember doing jujitsu with a guy, a black belt, who'd been a black belt for years, who was a savant, like he was a freak at this. And in jujitsu, you like clap, tap hands, and then, someone makes a move. And it's like a chess match from there. And I remember sitting across from him, or, getting ready to make my moves. And every time I thought about making the move, I felt like, well, that's not going to work. So after just sitting there kind of staring at him for 30 seconds, I was like, I don't know what to do, because your defense is so pure that I can't find an opening in here. And when your actions are that pure, there's nothing to defend. They're so clear. They're so penetrative. They're so powerful. They're so, again, clear, I think is the best word, or precise, that there's nothing else to say, right? Oftentimes it's very simple to just say, like, I have nothing else to say about that. And so it might have been the start of the start of the start of the start, but I was still thinking, who out there is struggling, and how do I help you? And how was I struggling? And I can tell you, I knew whole days, where I was like, if I'm up at 6 and I'm writing, or I go to the gym, or I'm at the beach doing a run, and then I come home, my whole day falls in line. If it's 9:32 a.m. and I haven't gotten off the couch, that day's fucked. I'm done. I can just write off the entire day. And going through a crisis, I also found that there were weeks that, like, if I started my Monday off, okay, I wrote Monday through Friday. If on Monday I was like, I don't know, I don't feel it today, then we were looking at next Monday before anything else got started.
Yeah, before you got to group and you shared and you said, but this week's going to be different.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never hear that one.
Yeah.
So one of the things you say about yourself, and this ties to what you're saying right now, is that you're an all-in kind of a guy, and that half measures don't interest you. How does that manifest in your daily life? I think we just heard some of it right there.
Yeah. I wrote Today I Rise in about 5 weeks, just nonstop. I woke up, I went to the bathroom, I either went to the gym or I sat down and started writing. I wrote Man UNcivilized in about 6 weeks, and it was the exact same process. I locked myself in a house. When I wrote Man UNcivilized, I don't know if I've shared this story with, or if you've heard this story. I finished it, and then I flew to New York to visit my buddy. And we were walking down the street together, and I actually stopped him and I said, I think I need to go to a hospital. And he's like, why? What's going on? And I was like, something's wrong with my head. I am fucked up in the head. And I have no history of mental illness. I have no history of, other than, going through divorce. I have nothing traumatic I got hit in the head a lot in my 20s as a fighter. But I said, something's not right and I can't shake it. And he went, okay, when was the last time you talked to someone other than me? And I was like, 6-7 weeks ago. He was like, when was the last time you went to the gym? And I was like, 6-7 weeks ago. When was the last time you ate food that you cooked yourself that wasn't like ordered or wasn't like shit? And I was like, 6-7 weeks ago. He was like, come with me. And we went to a gym and we just worked out, and he got me some food and we hung out, and I was like, I don't need to go to the hospital. It's weird. I cured myself, man. I'm a genius. But it was that intense.
You had locked yourself up to write.
100%.
You went full lockdown.
If you want the truth of it, I was pissing in Gatorade bottles. I wouldn't even get up from my seat to stop typing. It was like that, because it felt like it was coming through me, and I didn't want to stop that process. I can tell when writing's coming. I'll start to get emotional 2 or 3 days in advance and be like, what's going? Oh, shit. Words are coming. Okay, I need to clear Monday. And I'll sit here and I'll write for 8 hours straight. And I think when it started coming, I knew I was fucked. Like I knew I was in. I knew it was going to be a thing. I knew it was this massive thing coming through me. So yeah, all in, man. I don't know how else to live. I think if you want something, build it, go after it, do it. Like literally, we don't have that much time here. That sits with me. I watched guys die in hospice. I watched them in wheelchairs. I watched them in beds having to push a button so someone could come and help them take a shit. I know that's out there for me. I know it's there. I also remember what it was like to be 15 and go, wow, 30 years have passed since then. Okay, I want to do something impactful on this planet. I need to be engaged. I need to set my life up to allow for full engagement. And it doesn't mean that, brother, I don't want you to think that like I have a Netflix account, I have a girlfriend, like I do fun shit, like it's not, I'm not a monk, right? I go for walks, I go for hikes, I love life. But when it comes time to go, okay, it's game time, it's fight time, it's time to actually engage, I want full engagement.
Yeah, and I want to take people to the start of Man UNcivilized because that is a great story, and it shows how even great things come from humble beginnings. So when you first decided, wait a second, I want to work with fucking men, you put up a flyer and you were like, it's game on. And you had one man show up. And he just didn't want to eat McDonald's.
Right.
So why don't you take us through how that guy who didn't want to eat McDonald's but wanted his coffee became the Uncivilized movement?
Sure. I had moved out of my buddy's house. He was letting me live for free. And I was like, okay, I actually need to start paying rent in order to get the machine going, like to plug back into society. So I moved into an apartment in Brooklyn with another guy who I'd spoken with at TED, a fitness guy named Adam Cobb. And I just had some like inklings about men's stuff. Just was like, The business plan, Clint, was to do the Year to Live project, to take people on a year-long journey, to have like a year-long mastermind where I would work people through a 12-month process. I actually remember right when I got to New York, I hired my first business coach. And he said, okay, you have to put a video on our Facebook page talking about what you want to do with yourself. And I was like, A, B, and C. And then if there's any time left over, I want to work with men. So this was number 4 on the list. It was still not, it was like, yeah, all these guys are calling me. I'm having these conversations, but like, this isn't my jam. So gonna throw a men's group. I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just see what happens here in this building. We have this great event space downstairs. I put flyers up. As you said, I put it on Meetup. I was on like every possible social outlet telling people like, I'm throwing a men's group. Let's get 50 guys together. Let's have this big powwow and like prep for it. As you said, I walk downstairs, open the door, and there's one dude. And God bless him. He's now, I think he's famous now because I've told this story so many times. And I don't think I asked him a question. I just was like, hi, I'm Traver. And then boom, 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 like 45 minutes of Robert Masters, Robert Bly, masculine, feminine, way of the superior man, polarity, be the mountain, blah, blah, blah. And I think when I took my first breath, I was like, he goes, hold on. I followed you for a couple years on social media from when you were in the fitness world. I really need to lose 20 pounds. That's why I'm here. And I went, fuck. Okay, I can do this. Like this is my bread and butter for years. I can do this. I was like, tell me about your life. He's like, well, here's my problem. I can't not eat McDonald's burritos, McDonald's breakfast burritos. And I went, okay, well, this is you ready for the 7-second fix? You ready for this? Like I am going to take 4 years of Chinese medicine school, 20 years of athletics. I'm going to cram it all into one sentence. Never fucking walk into McDonald's again. And I was like, blah, blah, like waiting for like the heavens to open and for the light bulb above his head to go off. And he goes, I just can't do that. I was like, why can't you do that? Like, what are you talking about? Like you're forced to go to McDonald's? Because they have the best coffee. And fuck, right? My heart broke for a moment. I was like, I have so much experience helping people, and I'm literally up against a French press. Like a French press would this is the solve to your problem, and you're saying you can't. And so we finished the meeting. I gave him a hug. I actually have a photo of us together. And I went upstairs and I was telling Adam, I was like, bro, this fucking guy he can't go to McDonald's. Like, he can't not go to McDonald's. And then when we transitioned, we like hung out for the rest of the night. I think we actually, as I've shared, like we talked about some stuff with our dads. We talked about some early relationship shit that was still kind of messing with both of us separately, like things just in our past of relationships with women. And we hung out till like 11 o'clock and then went to bed. And the next morning, Adam, it was like he loved to get up early and work out. So I think he like woke me up at like banging on my door at like 5 a.m. I was like, 5 a.m. club, we're going downstairs to work out. I'm like, oh God. It's like throw on shorts and a t-shirt and go out in the kitchen. And he's making a shake for himself and goes, hey, when was the last time you ate McDonald's? And I don't eat that. So like, I just don't eat fast food. And so I had to think about it for a minute. And I was like, God, maybe in college, on like a water polo road trip or something. And I went, man, I don't eat that shit. That's civilian food. And he literally took his phone out and started recording me. 5 a.m. And I have like one eye open. He goes, what do you mean civilian food? Like, what is this idea? What do you mean civilian? And I said, take a look at our apartment, right? There's no television. There's no alcohol in the apartment. There's no drugs here. We didn't go out last night and party. It's 5 a.m. and we're getting ready to go like throw ourselves down a flight of stairs working out. We're going to kick the shit out of ourselves. We spent last night talking about stuff deep to both of us, our relationship to our fathers, our relationship to women, our relationship, things that have happened in our breakups. Like we connected on a very deep level. This is not how civilians live. And I don't want to be one. And he was like, okay, cool. Put his phone away, like drank his thing. And we went downstairs. And it was while I was working out that word, Clint, it just like, it wouldn't leave my head of like civilized versus uncivilized, civilized versus uncivilized, civilized versus uncivilized. And it hadn't fully developed, right? It was a year of teasing the word out, but it was, I want both of these. I want a life where it's 5 a.m. and I'm fucking using my body and crushing it and with my brother and we are throwing down and we are making ourselves strong and we are unapologetic about that. And we have the ability at any moment to drop into deep intimacy. Mm-hmm. And I'm not in a romantic relationship with Adam, right? But that's like right. We have the ability to connect and talk about real things, to share real things. That's when I went, so there's this primal element, right? Like there's primal fucking savagery. I need that as a man. And there's this depth of consciousness that I also need. And I can't pick one or the other. I refuse to pick one or the other. And what if men were presented with both in a single package? I just got chills again. And that was the day, right? I came upstairs. I put something on. I called the coach. I was like, hey, I'm switching the order. I'm going to work with men. I have this idea. I said, you want to have the uncivilized man? I went, nope. I want a man uncivilized. He went, okay, run with it. And I threw it on social media that day, just on Instagram with my like 1,000 followers at the time. I was like, hey, I have an idea. What if men looked at their lives differently? And we weren't asked to pick left or right. We weren't asked to pick primal or divine. We weren't asked to be a Navy SEAL or a vegan feminist poet. Like, what if we got to have both? And my life from that moment on was radically different because the reaction was, holy fuck, where's this been? Holy fuck, I've never heard anybody say this before. Holy fuck, I've searched my whole life as a man for something, but I've always been told it has to be A or B. And so the reaction let me know I was onto something, but in my own body, Clint, for the very first time, as opposed to being the weirdo cage fighter at acupuncture school and the weirdo acupuncturist in training when I was fighting, I got to be both.
The first time you were whole.
The first time I was whole.
Too much of life, people like to break things down to binary choices. It's a 1 or a 0. Why can't it be a 1 and a 0?
Right.
And so we're going to spend the rest of our time diving into the book. And early on, one of the things you talk about is in the past, we had the Marlboro Man.
Mm-hmm.
And he definitely had some issues. But over time, that evolved into what you describe as the overly sensitive new age guy.
Mm-hmm.
And a description I love of that you have is it's being a room full of dogs pretending to be cats. And what you say is it is as dangerous and insidious as its Marlboro predecessor, all heart and denies that balls exist. Can we unpack for the listener the evolution of manhood, say that in quotation marks, and what you see there? And then we're going to dive into what you talked about, because those are both either or paradigms. And what you're trying to go to is an either and, not an either or. Okay.
Yeah. So let me preface, I'm not a sociologist and I'm not a historian. Yet what I see, or what I had seen, was if we take the 1950s Marlboro Man, for people who can't grasp that idea, think about your classic, like the image of the Marlboro Man, the lone wolf, the like hat pulled down, not emotional, not connected, not in touch with his heart, afraid of being viewed as weak. Anything feminine is viewed as weak. Anything emotional is viewed as weak. And the worst thing that man can be is to be viewed as weak. So he's very disconnected from his emotions, from his heart, from women, from the feminine within himself, from the boy within himself, from playfulness, from anything that, in quotes, will be viewed as weak. And if we're talking history, and historians may skewer me on this, I think that was a lot of our fathers. That was a lot of our grandfathers. And then we have the 60s here in the US. We have the hippie movement. We have feminism, which comes in and says, hey, this isn't okay anymore. The Marlboro Man doesn't respect any of our boundaries, any of our consent, any of who we are. The masculine world doesn't accept who we are. And if we think about just the fuckery that was allowed back then, in the workplace, in society, of the abuse that was allowed, like just it was god awful. So we also have, for very good reason, a generation, let's just say, of a generation of men who were also raised by women who were afraid of or hated men. So coming into the 80s, coming into the 90s, because their fathers, grandfathers, or husbands were these Marlboro men. And they were trying to forge into society, into feminism was opening doors that those men were trying to kick closed. So then we have this generation that also, and I'm sure we can look at like socioeconomics. Like I remember my dad coming home most days at like 5 o'clock, but that stopped at some point. Then he started coming home at 7. Then he was coming home at 10. Then it was like, man, you work a lot. And it's like, yep, this is what we need to do to have the bigger house, the bigger cars, the private schools, the things. So he was essentially absent through no fault of his own, but so were my friends' dads, right? Like they all worked in New York City and would take the train in at 5 o'clock in the morning and would come back at 9 o'clock at night, but they made the money. They were the providers. So we also had a vast number of men who were raised by women, only by women. And by women who most likely, and I said were afraid of men or hated men for good fucking reason, because men were so traumatizing and had traumatized them. And if it wasn't that, they were simply raised with the absence of a male figure. So there you have an overly feminized man, a man who's actually been taught men are bad, men are evil, men are hurtful, masculinity is bad, being a man is bad. Being a man is trouble, right? And so that's where we get the separation of the sensitive new age guy. I'm teaching a class right now called Kill the Nice Guy. And I asked each one of those guys, think of how old you were the first time it was implicitly, explicitly, covertly, overtly, whatever you want to say, explained to you or shown to you that it's not okay to be a man. And every single one of them could go back to early childhood, to my parents got divorced and mom told me, you know why this is happening? Because dad's a fucking asshole, right? Or it was like dad was an asshole. I watched dad beat up mom. I watched my brother do, etc. So this, and I know this is a vast oversimplification for people listening, But that's how I feel we get to this place where we went, we have a lot of guys who were raised by men who said weakness bad, weakness weak, feminine bad, heart bad, all balls. And then this other group of men who was heart good, feminine good, emotions good, masculine bad, boys bad, aggression bad, anything male bad. And they're the sensitive new age guys. And sure, there's this swath in the middle who didn't get either, or who had, a different experience, but they're not attracted to this work. They don't need this work. But for a lot of us, it was one or the other.
Or they do need it, but they're afraid to go to either direction. So for example, you were, for people who, as you talk about the softer side of things or the feminine, or they look at you and say, oh, like you were an MMA fighter, right? So if you look at a lot of the people that had the background you had when you were doing that, many of them probably would not wanted to have shown that side of themselves. 100%. So they some of them might not have needed it because they might have been in touch with their feminine, with their artistic side, but they may have been afraid to show it. And what you're trying to offer is a path that brings both together. So you can 100%. Go to jujitsu and then you can go to your art class, right? You can bring it all together.
There are so many flavors of masculinity, right? We think that there's this one singular thing, like you this and you're that, and then you're masculine. Like there's so many ways for a man to express himself within the context of what I say of the primal and the divine. And there's so many ways to express himself, just acknowledging that he has both. That's really the point of all of this. When you say, yeah, I've got this side of myself that I can fuck some shit up if I need to. Now, I'm going to just pick some dramatically other directional things and say, and now I'm an artist, a poet, and a ballet dancer. I'm a yogi, a conscious meditator, a feminist. I'm all of these things. Beautiful. As long as you don't deny one side or the other, I'm cool with you. And you're fitting into my paradigm of uncivilized. It's when we shame the side of ourselves that says, oh, I can't even imagine, I can't acknowledge that I have that part of myself. I'm not primal. I just don't have it. I disagree with that. And like, cool, don't eat for a week. See what happens, right? And then go hang out with some people who have food and they won't give it to you. See if you're primal. You're fucking primal. You have it in you. And to other men of saying, oh, I have no emotions. I'm not conscious. That's stupid. Like, cool. Let me ask you, let me Robert Masters you for 4 questions asking about your childhood and your pain. Oh, here's a box of tissues. It's okay. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's never okay to cry except when your dog dies. It's such a strange world. So, Traver, what I want to do, because you're offering a course right now, and I hope there are many more iterations of it, which is the kill the nice guy. Yeah. It is one of the biggest problems that I see, probably you see, a lot of us see in men's work. Can you tell our listeners what a nice guy is?
Sure.
What some of the problems are with it, and some of the easiest ways for men to address the nice guy syndrome?
Yeah, and let's put first up, this is capital N and capital G. So this isn't like kill the nice person, right? Or like kill the kind person. It's like a syndrome that Robert Glover was the first one to name it. The nice guy is, in simple terms, a codependent male. It's a guy who is looking to the outside to make him feel okay with who he is in the world, how he exists in the world, and what he does in the world. So this is a guy who's made a contract with the world that says, if I take care of everybody else, if I make sure that everybody else is okay, if I source my okayness from the feminine, most likely from women, then my life is going to be easy, successful, and clear, right? So we all know guys like this, more comfortable with women than they are with men, terrified of conflict. This is a man who may not even acknowledge that he has his own needs. I don't have needs. My need is to take care of everybody else's needs, right? So a lot of people listening, especially women, are like, oh, these guys are the worst to date. It's the guy who just agrees with you and agrees with you and agrees with you and agrees with you, but secretly despises you because he needs something from you he can't get from himself because he doesn't know how to create it and source it from himself. So he is the classic wolf in sheep's clothing, right? And for guys listening to this, if you're the guy that like helps her move and like listens to her while she complains about her boyfriend and like, gosh, she goes, gosh, I can't believe no one snatched you up yet. You're so kind and so sweet. And you're like, yeah, I know. And you're secretly hoping that someday she'll just come to the realization that you've been the guy all along and she'll let you fuck her. You're the nice guy. And there is this insidiousness, Clint. There is this manipulation underneath it. Right, Robert talks about it. Glover talks about it. The idea of covert contracts.
Covert contracts. There you
right?
go.
Which are such a big deal for those of you listening. It's this secret deal. Like if I have this covert contract with my partner, and here's the contract. She doesn't know this exists, by the way, which is why we call it covert. But if I mow the lawn, do the dishes, and work an extra 20 hours this week, she's going to want to have sex with me. Now she has no idea. So it's Friday. I've done all the work. I've worked my extra hours. The lawn is mowed. The house is clean. The dishes are put away. And she comes home. She has no idea. She's like, oh man, I'm going to go watch a movie and put myself to bed. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm supposed to be getting sex right now because I did the things that equal me earning sex. And she has no idea. And so maybe 15 minutes later, she comes back out and is like, hey, you seem like you're upset. Is there anything bothering you? Now I'm a nice guy, so I can't have conflict. So I go, no, I'm fine. And I throw up some walls and I check out and then I get resentful. And then I tell myself it's okay because, like I can't upset her. And I do act. Then I'm like, you know what it was? I didn't do enough shit. So now I'm going to mow the lawn, like clean the house, do the dishes, do the work, re-roof the roof. Like, I don't know. I'm thinking of some other random shit. And I'm going to wait till next Friday. As opposed to actually going to my partner and saying, hey, you look amazing today. You know what I would love to do? I would love for us to throw on some candles and some Barry White, and we're going to make sweet baby love all night long. And I take the risk of her saying, you know what? I just don't feel it right now. I'm sorry. Or like, wow, that sounds amazing. Maybe Saturday night, but just not tonight. So the nice guy is terrified of taking a risk because here's the juice about the nice guy. The worst thing in the world to a nice guy is fear of rejection. 100%. Fear of rejection because rejection leads to abandonment. And then to a nice guy, abandonment, not cognitively, but deeply, leads to death. It leads to being alone, being kicked out of the tribe, having to like freeze and starve and die in the woods. So it's a deep-rooted fear of abandonment, which gets triggered by rejection. So he never risks rejection. So he never asks for anything. And he lives as this chameleon, trying to make sure that everybody around him is happy all the time, which is exhausting and which also creates a ton of resentment in that man. So inside of him, he's seething with rage. That's why he's so dangerous.
And I didn't think to dive into these today, but given everything that's happening, right? Given what happened in Georgia, and I know you've talked about this, what happened in Georgia last week, what we saw happen where you live in the last couple of days, how much of this is tied to these men who they just don't have the right outlet for what's inside them, and they haven't done the work to avoid these types of disasters?
I just recorded a video on this that I'm going to post in a little while titled Grief, Rage, Entitlement, and Machine Guns. And like, to me, that is the cocktail. The lack of even ability to honor and express grief. Like we're not allowed to do that as men in this culture. We're not allowed to be sad. You can't be fucking, what are you, crying? What are you, a baby? Like we can't do that socially. We're not quite like, oh, your dog died? Oh my God, come here, let me hug you. But anything else, as you said, it's like, that's not okay. So we have these guys that just are covered in grief, that have so much deep grief. And since they're not allowed to express it, what protects grief and sadness? To me, anger does, right? It's a bit of a cliche, but like anger is sadness's bodyguard. And so when you stuff down enough grief and you stuff down enough sadness and you build up enough anger, you create rage. And the rage is because of entitlement. I should be living a different life. The guy in Georgia, he said it clearly, like, I'm a porn addict, I should be getting more pussy. I should be having sex whenever I want it. I'm entitled to it, but I'm not getting it. I have to pay for it. Grief, rage, entitlement. Now we put a machine gun in this guy's hand and we've got what we've got. Right now, imagine if these guys, and I don't know the whole story of Boulder yet, it hasn't really come out, but imagine if these guys had 5 men in their life who were like, hey, you know what? You seem a little sad lately, like, and that's okay. Like, talk to us. What's going on here? Oh, you're sad about this? Oh man, I've been sad too. Like, truly, it's okay. You seem angry. How do we work through this? Right? You seem entitled. What about you? Feels like you're owed something by the world and by women and by the feminine. You're not owed anything, man. If you want something, go build it, create it. So I think it's the root of so much of it, Clint. And unfortunately, like, I get a ton of kickback talking about this. People are like, you're missing the point. It's all about guns. Like, well, yeah,
the gun's the tool that does it, but
100%. The gun is undeniable.
They could have a knife and they could kill 3 people.
There are and here in America, we love our guns. There are hundreds of millions of guns. So yes, we have an issue with guns. Yet all of those 100 millions of people aren't going out shooting people. So there's some other factor that we have to put in. And yet 99.99% of the time, it's also a male. So you go, okay, what about the male condition leads to this? And that's where I think, yeah, I would venture to bet that both of those guys were nice guys.
Yeah, and the something you talked about the other day that I want to make sure we have time for, because it was so timely that you talked about it, and then we have a second incident, is you said the line, let others be safe, for I walk among them. And I emailed that to myself to make sure that I gave us time to go over it today. Can you take the listeners through why you posted that video and what all men should be thinking about as it relates to that?
Yeah, thank you for that. I just got chills again. I posted that video because I spend a ton of time, like, a little bit removed, watching the interactions. And I watched the all men hashtag compete with the not all men hashtag. And I went, okay, you're both missing the point here. This was after, I don't know exactly how to pronounce her last name, but the woman, Sarah, I think Schrader or something like that, in England, who was kidnapped and killed by a cop. And the hashtag that really did go around was, she was just walking home. And so what unleashed all of this was how many women then responded on social media of, this is what's happened to me just walking home. And it's fucking atrocious, right? As a human, it makes me insane. As a man, it just sends me into a fury. Because one, there's 2 sides to this coin. One, it means the lost opportunity of men to say, everywhere I go, I have the opportunity to make sure people are safe simply by my presence. And that opens up all the work that you're doing. That means I've done the deep work. I've cried on the pillow. I've looked at my relationship with my mommy. I've looked at my relationship with the girl in 6th grade who told me I was ugly and she wouldn't go out with me. I looked at my relationship with a girl in high school who laughed at my dick. I've looked at how I've done this work. I'm safe not just because I know how to bench press and choke people. I'm safe because I'm safe inside. So 1, it requires men to do that work. But 2, you know why all of this came about, Clint? This whole fucking thing came about because before I wrote Man UNcivilized, it was the Me Too era in New York. And I kept reading and reading and reading and reading and reading about the problem. And I never saw one thing about the solution. And so when I saw the not all men arguing, I went, wait a minute. Neither of you are saying what we should do. All I'm hearing is men need to do better. Men need to do different. Men need to stop this. Men need to speak up. And I went, okay, I get the frustration. I get that we don't know what to give men what to do. We don't know how to solve this. And men, we get frustrated because we're like, what do you want me to do about it? I'm not a rapist. I'm not going to kidnap someone this weekend and murder her. So I'm not part of the problem. And so then those men check out. And so I said that sentence and wrote and shot that video to give men an alternative, because I'm a fucking dude. And I know when I'm given like a task that makes me feel good, I'll do it. But if you yell at me to stop doing something I'm not doing, I'm just going to check out. And so I wanted men to adopt the mantra, let others be safer for I walk among them. Because it just changes the mindset of, first, don't do no damage. Right? Like, what's the Hippocratic Oath? Right? Like, first, do no harm. So if it's just that, if you're just walking the streets and you're saying, okay, I let others be safer for I walk among them. Okay, my role tonight is I'm just going to do no harm. If every man just did that, we would have a massive shift in domestic violence. We'd have a massive shift in cultural violence and violence towards women and violence towards men, because we beat the fuck out of each other too. We shoot each other, we rape each other, we do all sorts of horrible shit to each other. But what if we actually took a step back and said, okay, I'm going to walk differently. I'm just going to have a different mentality. And then that spread, that became popular. Oh shit, right? And so I was on a call last night with a group of women and said, imagine if the default, like when you walk down the street at night and you saw 3 men walking towards you, what if we were at a place culturally where the default was, holy shit, if something goes wrong, those guys are on my side. Those guys will help. Those guys will be part of the solution, no matter what goes wrong. And it was just like mind-numbing to watch them, some of them crying, right? Other of them like silently applauding of like, oh my God, my life would be so different if that's the default about men. As opposed to the current default is, I need to cross the street, I need to get away from them because they're predators, right? They are the people doing the damage. So I want to talk about solutions, man. Like, I want to talk about the root of issues. I want to solve problems while I'm here. Not get caught up in the maelstrom of hashtag versus hashtag. You said this, so that means this. Well, fuck you then. And then now what have we solved? We've solved nothing, right? It's why I'm not talking about guns. I know it's super unpopular to say this. It's why I'm not talking about racism right now, because it just feels like that doesn't lead anywhere.
Yeah, it just dehumanizes the other side.
It just antagonizes each other, right?
And then the battle's over. It's what can we both sides agree are principally wrong ways to behave?
Exactly. And what can both sides then come together and go, wait a minute.
Yes.
So you guys are willing to say that you're going to don a protect, and you're really going to do it. You're not going to run around like trying to save us all the time, every time something goes wrong, but you're actually going to be part of the solution. We can trust you. We can start to trust you. That is the shift we need to see right now.
And I think a lot of your writing, and if men are living the way you write about in your book, a lot of those things will be addressed. So it brings me to one of the categorizations. You have a number of categorizations, whether it's the 5 pillars, the 12 ethos, but you also have, I think my favorite is fight, fuck, feed, and feel. And other than a little alliteration, what drove those 4 categories? This was a true story. It was a conversation I had when I was fighting. I would go to my jiu-jitsu instructor, was a guy named Chris Howder, and he was one of the early American Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belts in California. And he just turned his garage into a training center. And so we would just go there, and it was this massive gathering of high-level people in California, and we just beat the fuck out of each other. And one day, I don't remember what the conversation was about, but he kind of pointed to the group and was like, fighting, feeding, and fucking, Traver. This is what the male animal does. And at the time, I'm like late 20s, early 30s, was like, yeah, thank you, sensei. Like, you are so wise, right? And then when I got into the men's space, I went, wow, that's actually true. We need to have some semblance of understanding of how to protect ourselves, how to protect who we love, how to have sexuality, how to have desire, how to fuck into the world, how to feed ourselves, how to feed our hearts, how to feed our souls. But there was one that was missing. And I get it. He's a jiu-jitsu guy, right? He wasn't like, there wasn't two guys weren't like crying in the corner. He was like, oh, that's beautiful. They're expressing their emotions.
that was the missing piece, Clint. Feel. We have
Feelings.
to feel. And if you drop one of those, I feel like a guy has an issue. We need to have all four. You need to have proficiency or understanding or a relationship with each one of those four words. And I will say the most important now, I would say, is to feel, right? 10 years ago, I'd say it's to fight. You got to know how to fucking fight. You got to know how to protect yourself. You got to know how to like, grr. But now I really believe it's how many men we just live in a state of numb or hyper-reactivity. It's like numb or rage.
We were talking about that in the session today. In it, I mentioned I was watching comedians in cars getting coffee, and one of the Jerry's lines was, everything we do is just killing time. And I think with COVID, with isolation, the number of things people are doing to numb themselves are going up exponentially. And when we come out of this, I'm very worried you may have posted something along these lines recently. I'm very worried what we're going to see in the next 6 to 12 months with all of that repressed rage and numbness.
I think we're going to see here in the US more shootings. Like, I wasn't surprised that it was one and then a week later another. It's like, okay, I don't know. I've had this so pent up. I have no one to put it on. Oh, you're going to put me back in society? Okay, I'll do it.
And part of what drives that is, you've been talking about it, and I'm looking at a line I have here on the sheet, and it's resonating with what you're saying. Men want to be badasses. Men want to be rich. Men want to fuck beautiful women. But civilized men don't want to risk getting their asses handed to them in pursuit of those goals. Nor, from what I've seen in my young life, I think we're roughly the same age, Traver, do they want to do the work?
Right.
And you talk about, so we're going to unpack that one. We're getting near the end, but I want to tie that back to very early on in your book, because you describe the uncivilized man, and there's some things in there that really resonate. He has his father's work ethic, his mother's heart, and his brother and sister's best interest. He is his brother's keeper, his partner's protector, and his children's teacher. What I see there with that work ethic, with that heart, and what I see there with what men want, but what they're willing or not willing to do. Is that my imagination, or in a lot of the work you're doing, are you seeing that there's a gap between what people want and what they're willing to do for it?
100%. It goes back to when I was talking about the video of entitlement. Now we can even look at covert contract. My covert contract with the universe is all I have to do is show up half-assed and I get a 7-figure business, a model wife, and a 6-pack, right? And 4% body fat. And that's it. I don't have to do anything for it. And I think we're at this point culturally where, God bless tech, but they kind of skewed our view of the overnight success, right? Like, you have an idea, like whoever has an idea for an app, 2 months later, you're a billionaire. And it's like, okay, you really didn't have to go through the years of grinding. Or we've seen just the polished presentation. We don't see what happens in the background of successful people or people that we admire. And so, yes, I have a lot of men who come to me, and I understand it. It's a frustration of, where's mine? I've played the game. I did the things right. I'm nice. I'm nice to people. I'm not hurtful. I listen. I show up to all the meetings. I come on time to work. Where's mine? Like, where is this idolized life that I was shown in music videos, on social media, in all these places? Where is it? How come I don't have it? I see it. I think that's even more of the challenge right now, Clint, is that it's in our faces all day long. So it's like we can almost reach through the phone and grasp it, right? But it's not really real. And we forget like how many years it takes to build a business. We forget the sacrifices, right? Like when I first started this, I was renting a single room out of a guy's basement for like a year and a half. Like, that was not cool. That was not sexy. That was not like, oh my God, look at you living the dream. I had like a twin bed. I had 2 pieces of furniture, and every cent I made went into, I need a website. I need a photographer. I need a book editor. I need to spend $7,000 to buy the first 500 copies of this book before I can even sell one copy, right? Because I'm printing it myself. Like, people just look at the outside because that's so much of what we present. And then it does create this entitlement. And this is a whole nother conversation, but for so many men, if we look at the statistics of dating apps, you will have 10 to 15% of the men on Tinder are getting swiped by 80% of the women. So you have 80% of the men for 20% of the women. And so these guys are literally looking at beautiful women over and over and over and over and over all day long, but they just can't get a hold of one. They just can't talk to one. They just can't. Why is it? They're right there. I see them. I hear this frustration in men too. And I go, oh, I get it. You're being presented something that isn't possible for you. Of course, that's going to create frustration, resentment, anger, and rage, right? And where is that going to get pointed? It's going to get pointed at those women because they don't know the statistics. They're not like, oh, this is a rigged game. Oh, I didn't know that. They're just going, why not me? Why not me? Why not me? Wait a minute. Gary Vee is a billionaire. How come I'm not a billionaire? I post as often as Gary Vee does on social media. Oh, well, Dan Bilzerian is surrounded by Czech models all day long. How come I'm not surrounded by Czech models all day long? Shit, what's wrong with me? Why not me? Right? And so, yeah, I think there's a ton of entitlement in it, right? Or like, it's just for so much, for so much. Like, people don't realize the sacrifice it takes to build something. But what else are you going to do with your time here? What else are you going to do with your life, right? I have a 5-year plan for this business, 5 years of my life, of my 40s. I know what I'm going to do in this business. This is my hyper focus. I know what I'm sacrificing. Will it pan out? I have no idea.
That right there was a key word, though. You used the word sacrifice. You know, we're both in our 40s. We both have 5-year plans for ourselves. And in those plans, I'm pretty sure, is a lot of sacrifice. Are people willing to do what it takes to get what they want? As we come to the end of the time, is there anything that's on your list that we didn't cover that you want to throw out there to the world?
I think for men, here's something that I say to all of them. You're either leading or being led. Both are fine. Both are great. Just make sure you know which one's happening consciously, right? I can break the entire movement down to 2 ideas. That one, are you leading or being led? In every area of your life, you can break down. If you're having trouble in an area, I guarantee you're not leading in that area. And then number 2, what are your wounds? And what are you doing to heal them? Because as men, this is just not this thing we sit around the football game and shoot the shit about. Yet our trauma, our pain, if we don't alchemize it and release it, we punch it into the world. We shoot it into the world. We fuck it into the world. And that has to stop. And we can tell men stop doing that all day long, but they can't. They physically can't stop if they don't deal with the root, which is that wounding and that trauma. So guys listening to this, those are 2. If you take nothing away from this whole conversation with that last part, realize, are you leading or being led? What are your wounds and what are you doing to heal them?
And men out there, there's plenty of paths you can take to do that, whether it's therapy, whether it's meditation, whether it's psychoanalysis, joining Traver's men's movement. The men's movement I'm part of offers online groups as well, in-person groups in certain areas. So does Traver's. So there's lots of opportunity for you to do the work. And I think we would both say it's imperative that you do the work to live the life that you want to live. Traver, where can people find you?
I spend most of my time, even though I'm hoping to spend less time there, on Instagram. And that's at Traver Boehm, TraverBoehm. Or please check out my website, manuncivilized.com. You have links to the men's group, which is the Uncivilized Nation, links to my book, links to courses. Those are the 2 main places that I hang out. I have a podcast as well, the Uncivilized podcast. It's more co-ed than it is male-based. But really, feel free to reach out. If you guys hear this and you have a question, hit me up on Instagram. I spend a lot of time there talking to men and talking with men, and it's truly a pleasure.
And for those of you who have not read Man UNcivilized, I sent Traver a message after I read it. I started it on a Friday night. I was done it on a Saturday, and I've never wrote the word fuck yes, 2 words, so many times on so many pages. And Traver, you can see
Oh, I love it.
you can see my tabs there from,
Yeah.
so after a while, I probably should have just or tabbed a page that I didn't want to go to. It was beautiful, very well written, short, tight, punchy. I think people will learn a lot and they'll enjoy the reading process. So thank you for being here today.
My
and
pleasure.
I hope a lot of men grow from what we talked about today.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you for joining us on The Pursuit of Learning. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and head over to our website, thepursuitoflearning.com, where you will find our show notes, transcripts, and more. If you like what you see, sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, your host in learning, Clint Murphy.